Hey, squirrels! Changed hats. Just got this one off the machine. Gosh, I hope it doesn't look orange. Looks orange to me, but it's red. Red, red, a true red. So I'm red, white, and blue today. On Easter, I should be pastels. Look at this cute little color sheet. That was a freebie from Darn Good Yarn. So if you have youngins, or if you want to just color it yourself, they've been having one, like a free one, like certain days. Y'all know I got a whole like ebook of them the other day, and they all have different names on them. So I'm wondering if they're subscribers. I don't know if you'd call them subscribers, affiliates, or just people, customers. I don't know. But anyway, check out Darn Good Yarn for their wonderful stuff and for their free stuff. They've been having free patterns and free color pages. Okay, let's go with our Wuthering Heights. And I hope you guys are keeping up with, or if you like that kind of stuff, Anne of Green Gables. I read chapter 2 today, and whew, was that a doozy. And this one might be too. Chapter 2 of Wuthering Heights. Yesterday afternoon, set in misty and cold, I had half a mind to spend it by my study fire instead of wading through heath and mud to Wuthering Heights. On coming up from dinner, however, and then in parentheses it says, N.B. I dined between 12 and 1 o'clock. The housekeeper, a matronly lady taken as a fixture along with the house, could not or would not comprehend my request that I might be served at 5. End of parentheses. If I said something else, it was parentheses. On mounting the stairs with this lazy intention and stepping into the room, I saw a servant girl on her knees surrounded by brushes and coal scuttles, and raising an infernal dust as she extinguished the flames with heaps of cinders. This spectacle drove me back immediately. I took my hat, and after a 4 miles walk, arrived at Heathcliff's garden gate just in time to escape the first feathery flakes of a snow shower. On that bleak hilltop the earth was hard with black frost, and the air made me shiver through every limb. Being unable to remove the chain, I jumped over, and running up the flagged causeway bordered with straggling gooseberry bushes, knocked vainly for admittance, till my knuckles tingled and the dogs howled. "Wretched inmates," I ejaculated mentally. I love that word. "You deserve perpetual isolation from your species for your churlish inhospitality. At least I would not keep my doors barred in the daytime. I don't care. I will get in." So resolved, I grasped the latch and shook it vehemently. Vinegar-faced Joseph projected his head from a round window of the barn. "What ye for?" he shouted. "T' master's down in t' fold. Go round by t' end o' t' lath if you want to spake to him." "Is there nobody inside to open the door?" I hallooed responsively. "There's nobbut t' missus, and she'll not open." This is hard to read. Wish I could do the accent. "Open to you, and you make your flaysome dens till neat." She will not open. "Even if you make a bunch of noise till night." I reckon that's why. "Why, cannot you tell her whom I am, eh, Joseph?" "Norn to me, I'll hae no hend wi' 'ee," muttered the head, vanishing. The snow began to drive thickly. I seized the handle to essay another trial when a young man without coat and shouldering a pitchfork appeared in the yard behind. He held me to follow him, and after marching through a wash house and a paved area containing a coal shed pump and pigeon cot, we at length arrived in the huge, warm, cheerful apartment where I was formally received. It glowed delightfully in the radiance of an immense fire, compounded of coal, peat, and wood, and near the table laid for a plentiful evening meal I was pleased to observe the Missus, an individual whose existence I had never previously suspected. I bowed and waited, thinking she would bid me take a seat. She looked at me, leaning back in her chair, and remained motionless and mute. "Rough weather," I remarked. "I'm afraid, Mrs. Heathcliff, the door must bear the consequence of your servant's leisure attendance. I had hard work to make them hear me." She never opened her mouth. I stared. She stared also. At any rate, she kept her eyes on me in a cool, regardless manner exceedingly embarrassing and disagreeable. "Sit down," said the young man gruffly. "He'll be in soon." I obeyed and hemmed and called the villain Juno, who deigned at the second interview to move the extreme tip of her tail in token of owing my acquaintance. "A beautiful animal," I commenced again. "Do you intend parting with the little ones, madam?" "They are not mine," said the amiable hostess more repellingly than Heathcliff himself could have replied. "Ah, your favorites are among these?" he continued, turning to an obscure cushion full of something like cats. "A strange choice of favorites," she observed scornfully. Unluckily, it was a heap of dead rabbits. I hemmed once more and drew closer to the hearth, repeating my comment on the wildness of the evening. "You should not have come out," she said, rising and reaching from the chimney-piece two of the painted canisters. Her position before was sheltered from the light. Now I had a distinct view of her whole figure and countenance. She was slender and apparently scarcely past girlhood, an admirable form, and the most exquisite little face I have ever had the pleasure of beholding. Small features, very fair, flaxen ringlets, or rather golden, hanging loose on her delicate neck, and eyes, had they been agreeable in expression, that would have been irresistible, fortunately for my susceptible heart. The only sentiment they evinced hovered between scorn and a kind of desperation, singularly unnatural to be detected there. The canisters were almost out of reach. I made a motion to aid her. She turned upon me as a miser might turn if anyone attempted to assist him in counting his gold. "I don't want your help," she snapped. "I can get them for myself." "I beg your pardon," I hastened to reply. "Were you asked to tea?" she demanded, tying an apron over her neat black frock and standing with a spoonful of the leaf poised over the pot. "I shall be glad to have a cup," I answered. "Were you asked?" she repeated. "No," I said, half smiling. "You are the proper person to ask me." She flung the tea back, spoon and all, and resumed her chair in a pet, her forehead corrugated and her red underlip pushed out like a child's ready to cry. Meanwhile, the young man had slung onto his person a decidedly shabby upper garment, and erecting himself before the blaze, looked down on me from the corner of his eyes, for all the world as if there were some sort of mortal feud unavenged between us. I began to doubt whether he were a servant or not. His dress and speech were both rude, entirely devoid of the superiority observable in Mr. and Mrs. Heathcliff. His thick brown curls were rough and uncultivated. His whiskers encroached bearishly over his cheeks, and his hands were embrowned like those of a common laborer. Still, his bearing was free, almost haughty, and he showed none of a domestic's assiduity in attending on the lady of the house. In the absence of clear proofs of his condition, I deemed it best to abstain from noticing his curious conduct, and 5 minutes afterwards the entrance of Heathcliff relieved me in some measure from my uncomfortable state. "You see, sir, I am come according to promise," I exclaimed, assuming the cheerful, "and I fear I shall be weather bound for half an hour. If you can afford me shelter during that space." "Half an hour," he said, shaking the white flakes from his clothes. "I wonder you should select the thick of a snowstorm to ramble about in. Do you know that you run a risk of being lost in the marshes? People familiar with these moors often miss their road on such evenings. I can tell you there is no chance of a change at present. Perhaps I can get a guide among your lads, and he might stay at the Grange till morning. Could you spare me one?" "No, I could not." "Oh, indeed? Well, then I must trust to my own sagacity." "Are you going to make the tea?" demanded he of the shabby coat, shifting his ferocious gaze from me to the young lady. "Is he to have any?" she asked, appealing to Heathcliff. "Get it ready, will you?" was the answer, uttered so savagely that I started. The tone in which the words were said revealed a genuine bad nature. I no longer felt inclined to call Heathcliff a capital fellow. When the preparations were finished, he invited me with, "Now, sir, bring forward your chair," and we all, including the rustic youth, drew round the table, an austere silence prevailing while we discussed our meal. I thought if I had caused the cloud, it was my duty to make an effort to dispel it. They could not every day sit so grim and taciturn, and it was impossible, however ill-tempered they might be, that the universal scowl they wore was their everyday countenance. "It's strange," I began, in the interval of swallowing one cup of tea and receiving another. "It is strange how custom can mold our tastes and ideas. Many could not imagine the existence of happiness in a life of such complete exile from the world as you spend, Mr. Heathcliff. Yet I'll venture to say that, surrounded by your family, with your amiable lady as your presiding genius over your home and heart—" "My amiable lady," he interrupted with an almost diabolical sneer on his face. "Where is she, my amiable lady?" "Mrs. Heathcliff, your wife, I mean." "Well, yes." Oh, you would intimate that her spirit has taken the post of a ministering angel and guards the fortunes of Wuthering Heights, even when her body is gone. Is that it?" Perceiving myself in a blunder, I attempted to correct it. I might have seen there was too great a disparity between the ages of the parties to make it likely that they were man and wife. One was about 40, a period of mental vigor at which men seldom cherish the delusion of being married for love by girls. That dream is reserved for the solace of our declining years. The other did not look 17. Then it flashed on me. The clown at my elbow, who is drinking his tea out of a basin and eating his bread with unwashed hands, may be her husband. Heathcliff Jr., of course. Here is the consequence of being buried alive. She has thrown herself away upon that boor from sheer ignorance that better individuals existed. A sad pity. I must beware how I cause her to regret her choice. The last reflection may seem conceited. It was not. My neighbor struck me as bordering on repulsive. I knew through experience that I was tolerably attractive. Mrs. Heathcliff is my daughter-in-law, said Heathcliff, corroborating my surmise. He turned as he spoke, a peculiar look in her direction, a look of hatred, unless he has a most perverse set of facial muscles that will not, like those of other people, interpret the language of his soul. I see now you are the favored possessor of the beneficent fairy, I remarked, turning to my neighbor. This was worse than before. The youth grew crimson and clenched his fist with every appearance of a meditated assault. But he seemed to recollect himself presently and smoothed the storm in a brutal curse, muttered on my behalf, poor guy, which, however, I took care not to notice. Unhappy in your conjectures, sir, observed my host. We neither of us have the privilege of owning your good fairy. Her mate is dead. I said she was my daughter-in-law, therefore she must have married my son. And this young man is not my son, assuredly. Heathcliff smiled again, as if it were rather too bold a jest to attribute the paternity of that bear to him. My name is Hareton Earnshaw, growled the other, and I'd counsel you to respect it. Remember, that was the name on the house. I've shown no disrespect, was my reply, laughing internally at the dignity with which he announced himself. He fixed his eye on me longer than I cared to return the stare, for fear I might be tempted either to box his ears or render my hilarity audible. I began to feel unmistakably out of place in that pleasant family circle. The dismal spiritual atmosphere overcame and more than neutralized the glowing physical comforts round me, and I resolved to be cautious how I ventured under those rafters a third time. The business of eating being concluded and no one uttering a word of social conversation, I approached a window to examine the weather. A sorrowful sight I saw, dark night coming down prematurely, and sky and hills mingled in one bitter whirl of wind and suffocating snow. Oh, it won't be long till my life. All right, take me back to my butt. Snow. I don't think it possible for me to get home now without a guide, I could not help exclaiming. The roads will be buried already, and if they were bare, I could scarcely distinguish a foot in advance. Hareton, drive those dozen sheep into the barn porch. They'll be covered if left in the fold all night, and put a plank before them, said Heathcliff. How must I do it? I continued with rising irritation. How must I do? Instead of it. There was no reply to my question, and on looking round I saw only Joseph bringing a pail of porridge for the dogs, and Mrs. Heathcliff leaning over the fire, diverting herself with burning a bundle of matches, which had fallen from the chimney-piece as she restored the tea canister to its place. The former, when he had deposited his burden, took a critical survey of the room, and in cracked tones grated out, "Ah, wonder how you can fashion to understand the idleness and war when all 'em's gone out. Bud," I can hardly read this. "Bud, you're a knout, and it's no use talking. You'll ne'er mend over your ill ways, but go right to the devil, like your mother afore you." And it wasn't said like that exactly. I imagined for a moment that this piece of eloquence was addressed to me, and sufficiently enraged, stepped towards the aged rascal with an intention of kicking him out the door. Mrs. Heathcliff, however, checked me by her answer. "You scandalous old hypocrite," she replied, Are you not afraid of being carried away bodily whenever you mention the devil's name? I'll warn you to refrain from provoking me, or I'll ask your abduction as a special favor. Stop. Look here, Joseph, she continued, taking a long dark book from a shelf. I'll show you how far I've progressed in the black art. I shall soon be competent to make a clear house of it. The red cow didn't die by chance, and your rheumatism can hardly be reckoned among providential visitations. Oh, wicked, wicked, gasped the elder. May the Lord deliver us from evil. No, reprobate, you are a castaway. Be off, or I'll hurt you seriously. I'll have you all modelled in wax and clay, and the first one who passes the limits I fix I'll not say what he shall be done to, but you'll see. Go, I'm looking at you. And I'm going to stop right there, because it'll soon be time for Live at 5. And I'm probably almost done, but I'm not sure. So let me take a quick break, and I hope lots of people are here to listen to this, so you'll hear me say that Live at 5 is coming up. Ooh, I got to go fix my tea. I better hurry up. Be sweet, don't be ugly. See ya. Bye-bye.